What's up, everybody? This is Ed from This Day in Metal, and today I'm thrilled to be speaking with a man who really needs no introduction. He's been behind the drum kit for legendary bands like Death, Dark Angel, Testament, Strapping Young Lad, and so many others throughout his incredible career. One of the greatest drummers in metal history, the atomic clock himself, Gene Hoglan. What's up, Gene? How you doing?
Howdy, Ed. How are you? Thanks for
Great to be
having me here.
speaking with you.
Yeah,
So I
same
guess
here.
the most pressing news that you're involved with is that Dark Angel is releasing your first album of new material since 1991 next week. Extinction Level Event is out on September 5th on Reversed Records. This is a record that's been in the works for a very long time, right? What's it like to be so close to releasing it?
A vast relief. Absolutely. We're happy to be at this point. We're on the home stretch, the homiest of stretches. Now it's only about another week before it finally comes out, and this record has been a work in progress for some time, and we're I'd like to just thank everybody for their patience. I know that I mentioned this like around a decade ago, if not even longer, that yeah, Dark Age has some new material and we're going to be putting out a record before you know it. And I realized, I mean, I blabbed that, and I've mentioned it before, that what I should have said was nothing, and just let the album get done, then come out and just leak it as it were. But I've mentioned many times before that I don't have much of a filter. So sometimes if I get some kind of exciting news, I'll pass it along before its time is due. So I've mentioned that before. And so a lot of people have been asking me over the last decade, like, hey, where's this album that you said you were going to, every time Death to All will go on the road, or Death Clock, or anybody, um, you know, people will mention, oh, Hoagland has all the time in the world for Death to All or Death Clock. But won't put any time into doing the Dark Angel record. So now everybody gets to shush.
Yeah.
Now we've got the new record coming out, and I'm really, really excited about it. We're all excited about it. So, I'm excited for the metal world to at least get their hands on it and check it out. I'm really proud of it, and I'm more excited about this release than I get excited about a lot of albums I'm involved in, and this one is tenfold that excitement. So, this one's definitely a very close to the heart, and I'm just really excited that it's coming out and for people to give it a listen. Absolutely.
Well, there's a few reasons for that, I'd imagine, because A, this is where you started, and B, with Jim, right? I mean, this is kind of, dedicated to him, this album and the subsequent tour, right?
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's like Jim was, you know, Dark Angel was created by Jim, and I came along to Dark Angel a little bit later. My
Hmm.
first album was Darkness Descends,
Yeah.
and with Jim and myself, we both had a musical partner that was like-minded. I know Jim was looking to go heavier, and I was all about going heavy. So
Hmm.
I think when I joined the band, we had two like minds that were just ready to just start, bringing the intensity. So, Jim and I were a pretty prosperous writing partnership until, in 1989 when we were on tour, and Jim found it best for Jim to depart the band.
Hmm.
And, we understood, we get it. And so with that in mind, there was never any doubt that we would continue and carry on. And we were in 1989, we were fortunate enough to have Brett Erickson from Viking be ready to come on out and finish the tour that we were on. And then Brett stuck around, and we wrote the Time Does Not Heal record together, which, coincidentally was always Jim Durkin's favorite Dark Angel record. He's always told me all the time, like, Time Does Not Heal was my jam from Dark Angel. And so, we got the stamp of approval of Jim, when of the material that Jim was not a part of. So, Jim, Jim was as much a part of this album as Jim was able to be. The
Mhm.
latest record, Extinction Level Event, and that the the title track is musically solely Jim's, and this is a song that when after we got back together and we were doing a bunch of shows together, the reuniting pile of time, uh, Jim approached me with this song, um, and I was so excited by it. That just kickstarted my belief in, like, yeah, let's write a new record. And I had a bunch of old. Dark Angel had an album in demo form that we had started working on in 1991, 92, and that album was going to be called Atrocity Exhibition. And I handed over the disc to Jim and said, "Hey, well, I have no idea what we both kind of we traded our songs at the same time, and he got back to me pretty immediately, going, "Oh my God, this stuff is amazing! This is our next record. Let's make this. God, we got an album right here. We're ready to go. We can put this album out ASAP." And I was like, wait, Jim, this song that you just showed me, that is so intense and so mighty. And let me tell you, these songs on this demo that I've got that are 20 years old, I know I can level up from this material. It's killer stuff, but
Yeah.
I think it'd be awesome if you and I just got together and started writing what is current us now. And he's like, okay, well, let's try that. So we got together and we wrote as much as we could. We got together as much as our schedules would allow, which, Jim and I live about 2.5 hours apart. Um, and this was pre-pandemic, a lot less traffic from San Diego to Los Angeles these days. But back then, it was a 2.5 hour drive, so both ways. And I was driving up there as much as I could, and um, ultimately, what all of those days together and everything, however everything transpired, is that now we have a new Dark Angel album out, and really, really excited about it. Like I've been saying, I'm super stoked for it. So having Jim's musical legacy be very well, we're trying to look after what he's done. Like, we just finished a gigantic round of touring of the Darkness Descends tour in its entirety, sort of thing.
Mm.
And we've now just kind of closed that chapter. And now we're looking forward to doing the next chapter of the Dark Angel saga or whatever, and which will involve as much touring as we can get in. And I'm really excited about the new record, and being able to play a number of the songs live for everybody. I kind of view Dark Angels as a brand new band in a lot of regards, because it has been so long. I mean, a lot of our fan base now was not born, when Time Not Heal came out. So, we get to play for a bunch of new folks who have never even seen us before. A lot of people weren't familiar with Time Does Not Heal or Darkness Descends. They're like, hey, I'm hearing you guys really for the first time now. So it's like I'm well aware that for some we might be, treated as a new act. That's fine. That's killer, because I love the new record. I'd love to play the entire new album live, but we'll see how that goes. But I'm very proud of the record, so I stand behind every song on it. So there you go.
Yeah, and that tour kicks off next week. That coincides with the album's release. I want to kind of transition. So Dark Angel touring also ties into kind of Death to All in a way, because that's how you kind of met Chuck, right? Was on tour with them. Dark Angel toured with Death, or did you know him prior?
I knew him prior. Yeah, Chuck and
Yeah,
I were part of the tape trading days, and we got
yeah.
some letters back and forth together before then, and he was I was a fan of Mantis. I was a fan
Mhm.
of the early Death. There was a pretty viable tape trading scene, which obviously precluded, the internet, but that was our internet, before there was an internet. And so there was constantly tapes being traded all over the place. Kate and DePena was a part of the tape trading scene. And tons of guys working from Hyrax who were sharing the bill with soon.
Hmm.
Um, Chuck was a big part of it. Vadim Rubin, Borovoy Kurgan, and all the guys, all the early journalists like Don Kay and Monty Connor and Jeff Kitts and Scott Givens and all these guys that all went on to really lucrative careers in the music industry. All of us were all part of this big underground tape trading scene. And so that's how I got to know Chuck initially. And we did do some touring together. Actually, Chuck, we met physically for the first time. Chuck and Chris Reifert came to a Dark Angel show I think it was the Darkness Descends album release show, because they were in LA
You were in LA,
recording
yeah.
Scream Bloody Gore
Hmm.
and with Randy Burns, and same studio, same sort of kind of setup that we had used with Darkness Descends, and Randy had used for Killing Is My Business from Megadeth and a number of his other projects that he was working on up to that point. And so that's when got to actually shake hands with Chuck for the first time, and that was cool. He and Chris came out to the show, hung out, and that was cool. He's a big Dark Angel fan. We're big Death fans, so there you go.
So yeah, so then you end up joining the band, and I think were you surprised to get that call? I mean, I know the tour didn't end as well as maybe it could have,
Right?
and they had Sean Reinert, who you've been very vocal about praising his performance on Humans. So were you surprised to get that call
Absolutely.
to join the band at all?
Well, it was, with speaking with Borovoy from Blabbermouth, of course.
Mhm.
Borovoy was he was always a great help to the scene, because Borovoy was such, he had his finger on the pulse of everything that was going on. So I had reached out. I had just recently sort of taken a step away from Dark Angel, and Borovoy was helping me find a vocalist, because I explained to Borovoy, look, I'm putting together a new project and I'm looking for a vocalist. Can you help me find a vocalist? And in all of that searching, he's sending me tapes. Try this guy. Look at this guy. Check this guy out. Um, and I get a call kind of out of the blue from Borovoy saying, "Hey, man, I was just speaking with Chuck, and he's looking for a band. He's looking for a drummer. Your name happened to come up. What do you think?" And since the last kind of dealings that Chuck and I had ended rather acrimoniously, I was like, well, this is an interesting turn of events. I would have never thought to be getting this kind of phone call right now. So would I'm interested. Human was a crushing record, and
Yeah.
if he doesn't have Sean playing for him right now, then wow. But yeah, let's chat. And but before the end of the day, Chuck and I were chatting, and I've mentioned it before. It was like we picked up the last cool conversation that we had before it all just turned sour there for a
Mhm.
while, which we were kids, that's that you get over that stuff. But yeah, so we just started off a killer conversation, and it led to Chuck sending me out a riff tape that he was working on, which eventually became the Individual Thought Patterns record. And that was the impetus there. Borovoy Kurgan was a large part of, this era of Death coming together. Absolutely.
Yeah, so you worked on individual thought patterns first, and then you did symbolic as well. And I know that Steve DiGiorgio was also a big part of like symbolic in the demos and things like that. Those are
Mhm.
two incredible albums. Like, what was your experience working on those like with, those people around you?
Well, it's like to start. I remember Individual Thought Patterns had to kind of come together pretty quick, because there was kind of a recording deadline that had to be met, and um, I know we had to put that one together pretty quickly. We rehearsed for about 3 weeks or so before we hit the studio, and I remember um, I remember thinking, wow, we put this album together in 3 weeks. What supermen we are, And now 3 weeks, that's adorable, man. Like, I've been putting an album together overnight, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Now. There's getting 3 weeks to rehearse a record. My God, that's awesome.
Technology's changed
Like
a little bit over the years, but yeah.
Right. You don't get that a lot of times. A lot of
No.
times I'm having to learn an album in the car on the way to the studio or
Yeah.
or on the plane to the way to the city to go record the record. I'm learning the material then. But then we had 3 weeks. I thought, wow, we are just absolute, you know, legends to put this together in 3 weeks. And so but it came together pretty quick, and it really, to me, it kind of sounds like it. It kind of sounds. I've always referred to it. It's kind of like a bull in the china shop of taste and stuff. It's just there's like this immediacy to the individual thought patterns
Mhm.
record. You can kind of hear it, as opposed to symbolic, which we had a lot more time to kind of work on the material. And if you notice, that album just kind of settled in a little bit, and that one, it's not as just frenetic and sounding. It's got a little bit of like ooh, that's got a little more atmosphere to it, due to the fact that we were able to spend a number of months working on that one. So but I remember tons about both sessions and both recording areas of time. And that's definitely when Steve DiGiorgio and myself, we became brothers,
Mhm.
during the individual thought patterns record. And Steve and I had such a, we shared a mind, definitely a rhythmic mind, a an approach of the rhythm section sort of mind. And we were definitely in a, hey, what you got? I got this. What you got? Well, I got this, kind of thing. So we fed off each other's energy quite a bit. And, Steve likes to tell the story about, like, I guess there was some time when we were playing some shows live, and Steve and I were just both pushing the boundaries so much that Chuck had to come to Steve and say, hey, man, like, what you guys are doing is killer. However, can we just, like, I have no idea what you guys are doing back there. Can we just kind of relax it just a little bit? And, Steve was like, yeah, sure, man, no problem. But, that was pretty fun, like, we are a metal band after all, we are not
Yeah.
prog jazz fusion kind of thing. Um, so that was pretty fun. But yeah, those were great eras. And working with Chuck was, musically, it was very easy to work with Chuck because he never set any boundaries on anybody. I mean, he was always, I would, take a pause every once in a while, in certain sections of our recording, I mean, of our writing periods, and be like, hey, these patterns I'm playing, are you cool with these? Are these good for you? It's like, yeah, man, I could play all my guitar parts over everything that you're doing, so I'm cool, And I've said before, he always liked to say, go sick, go nuts, you're here because you're you, and be you, and I'm all for that. So Chuck, as a musical collaborator, was great. He wrote killer riffs, and he was very open to everybody's ideas of expressing. He never once told me, I want you to play this beat. Even after he was getting his rudimentary drum programming together, because he didn't know how to program drums at first. I got the entire symbolic record in this really, really simplistic, you could tell the drum programming is coming from somebody who's learning how to program. Um, and he's like, these are some templates, but don't follow any of them if you don't want to. And I'm like, okay, well, hey, you've kind of given me an idea of where you'd like a snare to be hit, or like a certain pulse of a kick drum. I get that, but yeah, I'm going to do my own thing with all this. He's like, yeah, by all means, please do. So that was pretty cool. Chuck was easy to work with in that regard. Totally.
Yeah. So speaking of symbolic, right? This tour is going the fall tour kicks off in November in San Diego, and then you guys are playing across North America. Um, you're playing symbolic and spiritual healing to celebrate the 30th and 35th anniversaries, respectively, right? Um,
That's right.
Obviously it's a great tribute to Chuck and like all the music that you guys have created in the band. But I think it also gives people a chance to appreciate the other people that were in Death, and maybe they were even unaware that, like, of who these main players were. So they're, maybe they didn't get as much credit at the time. Death was really, it was, Chuck was the headline a lot of the time, I feel like. And
Indeed.
maybe
Of
a lot of
course.
these guys didn't get a chance to be appreciated properly. And maybe there's fans like me who didn't get a chance to, see these songs provide like performed live.
Sure.
So I think it's such a
Right.
great thing. Like, how did this idea of paying tribute to the music this way come to be?
Well, a lot of it was coming from back in 2011. Um, I was doing a massive kind of worldwide clinic tour that just happened to coincide with the re-release of Individual Thought Patterns.
Mm.
And so I was kind of doing a clinic tour based on the Individual Thought Patterns record, and playing a bunch of songs from it, telling the stories about the record, about the recollections of all the recording process with it and all that kind of thing. And the guys from Sick Drummer, Anton and then Ian McDonald had kind of put together this thought, with that as a jumping off point of putting together a tour that would encompass the entirety of Chuck's catalog, and also the guys that played in a lot of the projects, a lot of the albums. And so that was a pretty neat idea. And so that's kind of the impetus of it. And I know that for me, a lot of where I was at the time did not involve a lot of retrospection, where I'm looking behind and going,
Mm.
hey, let me play some Dark Angel stuff again, or let me go back and play some Death stuff, because I was always about moving forward into whatever the next project or the next genre or the next sound was going to be. But this, looking back fondly on the Death material, they were like, hey, this is an important part of, you had an important part in this band. So, for people to be able to see it, nobody would ever think that we're ever going to see Chuck's music ever again, Death music played again, let alone by the people who actually played it.
Yeah, and wrote some of yeah.
That's right. So, it was a pretty important step forward in I guess the posthumous legacy of Chuck.
Yeah.
And so, what a great concept. And getting the guys, getting Sean Reiner, getting Gene, getting Richard Christie, he came out and played, he was pretty involved in the Howard Stern show at that time. So I think Richard was able to come out to the New York show and play a song or two, and having a number of guest musicians across the board. Of course, there was the actual guys from the band, Sean, of course, and then Paul Masvidal, Bobby Coble, Shannon Ham, Scott Clendenin, Steve DiGiorgio, myself. We had a number of guys from the actual bands, and we'd have a few guest stars. I remember we had Trevor from Black Dahlia Murder come out and sing a song. We had Travis from Cattle Decapitation. We had Alex Skolnick came out and played a tune. That was pretty fun.
Yeah.
And so, it was just a really kick-ass limited engagement event, but it also allowed, for the template to be laid of like, hey, we can actually do this, So, and I remember just a few days before the initial Death to All run started, I remember Sean injured his leg. I know he tore his Achilles tendon or something like that.
Oh,
so he
God.
was in a cast. And so they kind of looked at me like, hey, man, can you play all the Sean material? I was like, God, I used to do tons, yeah, I'd love to, play Sean's stuff. I love Sean's drumming, and my favorite era to play was the Human era. Flattening of Emotions, I always said, was my favorite Death
Killer
song
stuff.
to play live. That's amazing tune. So, Human was such a crushing record that, yeah. And I remember Danny Walker was our drum tech, and Danny would come on and also play maybe Secret Face or something, one of the transitory songs. Sean would start off. I think they ended up giving Sean some of the real simple, things that you could do with a double bass you can play with a cast on your leg.
Hmm.
So I think Sean was doing the leprosy, scream, bloody gore kind of stuff, spiritual healing, all the easier drumming, I guess. And then Danny would be the transitory drummer and play Secret Face. And I would do the rest of the set. I played like 18 songs that night because there was a crap load of songs. And so that's one thing that we've always tried to do is, since Death Do All decided to continue it continued in a couple of certain incarnations. And then in 2014, it kind of solidified into this incarnation. And that's one thing that we're all sort of relatively insistent on, especially myself, is like, you got to cover it's death to all, not just death with the 3 albums that we did, like
That's
Steve
everything.
with Human
It's
and
everything. Yeah.
Individual, and Bobby with Symbolic, and me with Individual. It's like you got to play everything. That's death to all of death to all. So
Yeah.
that's why we play the entirety. We're the only band that does this, and that's why you are going to have an incredible night of metal. Whether you find it to be nostalgic or whatever, or if it's just a killer trip down memory lane, or if it is the fact of like, hey, those were deadly shows back in the day. I want to see those shows again. I want to see death music being played live, or I never got to catch any death shows back in the day.
That's
That
where I'm
happens,
at.
right? So that's a lot of, and this is just about the best possibility, best representations. It sounds like death, and an important part of the shaping of its sound is our vocalist and Chuck of Death to All,
Hmm.
Max Phelps. Max is
Yeah.
incredible. He's an incredible musician, and he's an awesome guy as well. He's one of my favorite folks on the planet. All these guys in Death are, man. I love everybody in Death and in Death to All. And Max, he's concerned about properly representing Chuck's vocal legacy as well as his playing. So and it's all pretty common knowledge that Chuck's vocals were rising from album to album
Hmm.
to album, and Max is very cognizant of matching the vocal style to each era. Max does that. There are a lot of guys out there that hey, I got one death metal voice, so I'm going to use it on every song ever. But Max is a fantastic, amazing musical chameleon, and that's due to his talent and his care for his concern to honor the legacy of the music. So that's pretty darn cool. So Death to All is a fantastic kick-ass act.
I'm very excited to see it. And you were talking about learning other people's parts, and I feel like that's something that you have to do on the fly a lot. And speaking of that, I have one question. How did you end up in Opeth's Grand Conjuration video?
No, because I had to learn a bunch of Martin's parts over the course of about 4-hour afternoon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty well known story now. That was at uh, in 2005, I think it was 2005. There was the Sounds of the Underground. I believe it was the first Sounds of the Underground tour, which featured like Lamb of God and Opeth and Unearth and Poison the Well, and then Strapping Young Lad was a part of it, as were a
Hmm.
bunch of it. Chimera, one of the other headliners, and Strapping was a part of it, and Opeth was on the run. And I remember it was in Tulsa, Oklahoma one day. I walk into catering, and there's all the guys from Opeth looking pretty sad. I'm like, hey, what's going on, guys? And Michael explained that we just had to let Martin go. Had to put him on a plane, and they weren't sure how to carry on. And I think, somebody had said, Gene, do you think maybe you can, learn a few Opeth tunes and we got a show in about 5 hours, and you learn a set.
Could you learn a
And
13-minute song real quick? Yeah.
4 of them.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
4, 5 or 6 of them.
Yeah,
Yes, I
exactly.
learned all of them that quickly. And so, yeah, I was like, yeah, let's do this. I'm always up for a musical challenge like that. How fun is that? And it's
Yeah,
Opeth,
I've
like
noticed that to be a
all
pattern in your career. Yeah.
right. I mean, Opeth's set on that tour were just full of bangers after bangers. So
Mm.
yeah, like darn tootin'. And they were doing the Grand Conjuration, which this was back, prior to YouTube. The album wasn't out yet. The album wasn't coming out for another month and a half, 2 months. So they were debuting a brand new, fresh Opeth song, Grand Conjuration. And that was like the first one I insisted upon playing. They're like, hey, maybe we can do, maybe you could do some Deliverance and some Blackwater, the Drapery Falls, and maybe this one, Demon of the Fall, and this one and that one. And make sure we do Grand Conjuration. And I butchered it, over the first few days, but we were able to start the song and complete the song in order, so that was pretty good. And the day before the Los Angeles show, they we're in LA and they had a video shoot already planned, and they were like, "Would you, can we set up some drums and have you, play on the video?" And I think if you blink, you miss me. I think. I remember seeing the video 20 years ago.
I watched it back. You're in there. You're in there. And people pick up on it too. People have picked up on it as well. There's a whole crew of Opeth fans that are waiting for like a secret album that you guys recorded with you on the drums in between Ghost Reveries and Watershed. So
right, that would have been amazing. My word, that would.
I read a whole thread on it yesterday.
I want to hear that record.
I'd love to hear it too, actually.
Right. Dang, that was pretty fun. Yeah, but that was a blast doing, and I love Opeth, and that was a really, really good time. And I thank them for allowing me that opportunity. Absolutely.
I thank you for allowing me to have this opportunity to interview you. I know in a recent interview you said you're going to continue to do this as long as you can. I hope that's true, and I'm looking forward to whatever you choose to do next, man. Like it's been awesome getting to speak with you.
Awesome, man. Thank
Dark
you.
Angel's Extinction Level Event will be released September 5th through Reverse Records. You can pre-order signed copies of the album and an exclusive red vinyl version on the Reverse Records website through September 15th. Dark Angel's first North American tour in over 30 years starts the day the album is released. Death to All's tour celebrating spiritual healing and symbolic will be hitting spots across North America in November. Gene, thank you so much again, man, and best of luck with everything. I'll see you at Irving Plaza. I'm going to be there for that show for Death to All. Very excited.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Ed. Looking forward to that. And yeah, please, everybody come out to both shows, both tours. You're going to dig it. Great nights of metal. Get to see some killer playing and some intense metal. Darn tootin'. We'll see everybody on the road.
You heard the man. Get out there. All right, Gene. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. You take care. We'll see you.
Too.